Today on the show, we have Jon-Yin Chong, and you're a former listener, but you're going to have to introduce yourself to all our listeners and to me again, because I'm just getting caught up to speed here.
Listener and student, Ben. Didn't you take one of our live classes, Jon-Yin?
Oh, yes.
Where was that? In New York?
New York in 2019, I think. I remember Ben trying to hawk an iPad. And then I believe I sent you a message on LinkedIn afterwards with a site for if there were no takers, you could drop it off there.
Wow, I do vaguely remember this. We had bought a bunch of iPads when the digital LSAT first came out. And I think we ended up realizing we didn't need them as much as we thought we did. So then I was trying to get rid of them so that they weren't just wasted pieces of garbage. I actually have two on my desk right here still from that time.
I bet the LSAC is trying to do that same thing these days in a much larger scale, since they bought like 10,000 of them or whatever it was to do the briefly in-person digital LSAT.
Well, Jon-Yin, I'm sorry I didn't remember that interaction until right now, but you are dressed up in a suit. You are ready to go. I mean, you're going to put us to shame on some level. Tell us a little bit about your background. So that was all the way back in 2019. What are the key highlights?
Oh boy. So I guess I'll back out even further. Hopefully won't bore any listeners. Graduated from Cornell in 2017 with undergraduate degree in applied economics and management. Got a master's the next year in management with accounting concentration. Joined Ernst & Young, another Ernst & Young alumni, like your friend Nikki, a couple weeks back. Did that for a year, then worked in more public interest work in end of 19 into 2020, and joined the federal tax clinic of Harvard Law School as an intern in April 2020 at the onset, the real onset of the pandemic, when things really started to come to a head, and then was hired as a paralegal at HLS. And that's been going on since the fall. Okay.
And then you started studying for the LSAT in 2019 or before that?
Oh yeah, 19. And my first take was, I think, in November 19. I've taken it 5 times. It's been a journey.
Good. Tell us a little bit about that journey. Where'd you start? What are some
diagnostic? 149, I think, cold. So start out very low. Started doing a lot of, I don't know, I approached the test a little weird, I think, in that because my diagnostic was so low, I felt like I really needed to get a handle on each section to sort of build confidence. So I grinded out Nathan's Logic Games books for a while, got good at LG, then got good at LR, finally at the end got good at reading comp through Kaylin. Kaylin is incredible. Shout out to Kaylin. Changed my life. But
Kaylin's one of our tutors at LSATdemon.com. How long did you work with Kaylin, and like how regularly? How did that tutoring relationship work out?
Once a week for about 2 months. And just to give a little background, before I worked with Kaylin, I'd taken the test 4 times. I went from a cancellation to 162 to 172 to back down to 166. And then on the February LSAT, Kaylin got me to a 178.
Whoa.
Amazing.
Yeah. Wait, and that was February, or what LSAT was that?
February. Yeah, that was
February of this year.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so what's your plan? Your plan is you've already applied, but you're going to withdraw, or you haven't applied yet?
I've applied to 10 schools. I was waitlisted or rejected at 9 out of the 10. And then for the one that accepted me, which I really do like, am considering, they offered me unconditional full ride for all 3 years.
Okay.
So
you're sitting on that offer while also looking at those wait lists. Yeah, that's interesting. Except the problem, of course, Jon-Yin, is that you applied before that 178, and you got a bunch of denials before that 178 even came in. And this was the most competitive law school admission cycle ever, as far as we know. And so you've got one, sounds like pretty good offer, a full ride at a school that you like, but you have no idea what all the other offers will look like if you apply at the beginning of the next cycle with your 178, which you're primed to do, which is only, what is that, 5 months from now?
Yeah.
Not even.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I know that you're itching probably to pull the trigger on that one offer that you have. But boy, I would love to see what kinds of offers you would get if you just hold off for a few more months. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. Like, what are you giving up, right? That's always the question, the opportunity cost. But also, it's interesting to me that you took the test in February. That's when you got your 178. It is now April, and there hasn't been any movement on any of those waitlisted schools.
7 of my offers were already in by then. I applied relatively early, I guess, in the cycle. So late October through November were my applications. So I already got a bunch of decisions back. So only 3 schools had access to that new score, or before, I guess, were pending. The applications were pending.
Wait, when you say you got a decision back, oh, so they said no.
I'm a big splitter, not as big as some of the ones you've talked about on the show recently, but yeah. I have a 3.07 LSAT GPA. So very, very low.
Sure.
Had a lot of difficulties starting school back in 2009. So this is my undergraduate degree. I wasn't in school this entire time, but it spans from 2009 to 2017. So my transcript's a little bit messy, and I have this really, really big split.
Yeah.
So I think people made a lot of decisions on me pretty quickly, which is understandable, right? It's numbers game, and I can empathize with the schools. So
yeah, but I mean,
go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, just the difference between a splitter, you were a 172 with a 3.07. Now you're a 178 with a 3.07. And yeah, the split is wider, but to your benefit. I mean, it's not like 3.07 is a terrible GPA. And you studied economics?
Yeah.
So, it's a semi-scientific degree. I'm sure you had to take some math classes and some accounting and some,
Absolutely.
stuff that a lot of poli-sci / English majors never take. And so I think, that 178 is going to be much more likely to make them kind of recognize that you had a bit of a technical background, and it was a long time ago, and the 178 is fresh. I just, I'd put a pin in that full ride, and I would expect to get that same full ride next year alongside a whole bunch of other offers that you can then compare it to. I'll be shocked if it doesn't go down that way. I don't know.
What do you,
Ben?
Yeah. I mean, Jon-Yin, what are you leaning toward doing yourself? Maybe before we talked to you, maybe now. No pressure.
Because it's a full ride, because it's a school that I really like, and I have a somewhat more personal connection with the people because I've worked with them. They have a very good tax clinic there.
Yeah.
I want to give it all the due consideration, and we'll go into this a bit later.
I guess you don't want to say the school, right?
No, I'm happy to. I'm happy to advertise for Villanova Law School and their incredible federal tax clinic, Professor Christine Spidel. My boss, who's, oh God, I hate sounding braggadocious, but need to give the people who supported me their due, right?
Yeah.
Is probably the most famous low-income tax clinic director in the country, my boss. And Chris, he edited basically a manual textbook that's sent to all the LITCs. And she's the new current editor for the next edition. So working with her for 3 years or 2 years and so would be incredible. That said, I actually thought about applying last cycle, and Nathan talked me out of it. I'm tipping my hand a bit to something I'm going to say later, but it's just not applying and doing everything that I've done this year, which we'll get into in a bit, I never knew any of that was possible or could happen. And next year could be even better. So I'm definitely leaning towards reapplying.
Okay.
But out of all the professional considerations and how good of a match I feel Villanova is for me, I'm holding out a little bit. But I'd say it's a 60-40 right now.
Cool. Let's talk about low income tax. How'd you get into that?
All right. So in 2016-2017 academic year, Professor Beth Lyon of Cornell Law School, the founder and director at the time, or I think she still is the director of the Farm Worker Legal Systems Clinic at Cornell, linked up with one of my tax professors, the incredible Professor John McKinley over at the Dyson School. And they got money from Engage Cornell, which is a program at Cornell that provides funding for experiential education to do low-income tax work. Now, you might sort of be wondering, what would an immigration clinic want to do tax work for? Why is that important? It turns out that tax returns can actually, and a history of filing tax returns specifically, can be a big boon for immigrants in really tricky situations like deportation. So if you're in immigration court, you're facing deportation, and you can prove that your client had a history of filing tax returns, that can be points towards what's called good moral character. And with good moral character, you can get judicial leniency. And this is a terrible proposition, but sometimes for some migrants, it's a good one. You can elect to self-deport, which means you pay for your own deportation in exchange for no strikes against your immigration record. And even in certain cases, if you can prove 10 years of residency in the US and good moral character, you may qualify for what's called cancellation of removal, which then takes you off deportation proceedings and puts you on a path towards naturalization. For immigrants who have already come to the US and gotten status, tax returns can show proof of income. Income is necessary to sponsor another relative coming into the US. You need to be able to show that you can take care of them. Also, just to go back to the cancellation of removal, you can also get residency from a history of filing tax returns. So there's a surprising amount of synergy there. There's also the fact that in the migrant community, they're often faced with high costs and a limited number of options in terms of tax service. So there's some unscrupulous preparers who will take advantage of these people because they speak the language. These people may not have a lot of places to turn to because they lack technology, they lack language skills, and they lack transportation. So that's where the synergy comes in. And we initially had a survey, upstate New York Migrant Tax Needs Assessment Survey, surveyed 205 migrants, majority of whom were undocumented, found out there was a need for more tax service targeted at that group. And that led to our funders giving us increased funding for just tax advocacy carte blanche or at large. So I, during my master's year, being the beneficiary of really just good timing and being in the right place, got to help them build out that program at Cornell. So I started 2 tax service trips, one to Alaska, one to California. Actually, you might be familiar, Nathan. I went to Kern County in Bakersfield.
Oh, wow.
So,
lucky you.
Yeah, went to that area to do migrant targeted tax, and also to learn about the civil rights history of the farm workers rights movement, and ran 2 symposiums, formed a connection with a local organization doing taxes. And that's where I really cut my teeth, if you will, especially on the Alaska trip. And this was really cool, actually. A year after I graduated, and I think a week after I left EY, Cornell sent me to Denver because as part of our greater farm worker advocacy at the university, which the tax stuff was part of, we were up for a national award. So I was part of the 4-person final presentation team to compete for that award in Denver, and we actually won for our migrant-centered work. So it's been quite a journey, and that's how I got to the federal tax clinic. But I'm sorry, that was probably not so much what I do, but a lot of background.
No, it's interesting. I'm sure people like to hear about the different ways that their interests intersect with the law, which it does in a lot of different ways. So thank you.
You're still doing low income tax on a volunteer basis. And that's actually what got you into the federal tax clinic at Harvard. But you're not doing, I mean, that's not a low income tax thing. That's, tell us about the federal tax clinic.
Sure. So the federal tax clinic is part of Harvard Law School's Legal Services Center. Oh, I should also say, I need to give a slight disclaimer at the top of this because I am representing the tax clinic. So there's a good chance I'm going to touch on taxes in this interview. And when I do, it'll be in a very broad sense. Nothing should be construed as tax advice from the Federal Tax Clinic of Harvard Law School. With that out of the way, the Federal Tax Clinic.
I'm so glad you said that. We've wanted a legitimate disclaimer on this show for years and never had one. They've all been made up. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Happy to be the first after, I don't know, I think this will be 296, episode 296.
That's right.
So I'm glad I got to do it. All right. So the Federal Tax Clinic is part of Harvard Law School's Legal Services Center. The Legal Services Center consists of the Family Law and Domestic Violence Clinic, Predatory Lending Consumer Protection Clinic, LGBTQ plus Advocacy Clinic, Housing Law Clinics, Veterans Clinic, and of course, Federal Tax Clinic. And together we're like a community-focused law firm. We are a community-focused law firm. So though I should say our work can and does broader change. And at the Legal Services Center, students work under attorney supervision to provide essential legal services to low-income clients. Our mission is to educate law students for practice and professional service while simultaneously meeting the critical needs of the community. For listeners who may be unfamiliar with the clinical component of legal education, clinics give students the opportunity to gain hands-on experience with interviewing, counseling, and advising clients while in law school. During their time in a clinic, student attorneys advocate for and represent real people on real cases. If you've ever seen Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs, clinics are analogous to the teaching hospital type environment that's sometimes portrayed on those shows. Clinical experience is optional, but at HLS, the overwhelming majority of students participate. 91% of the class of 2021 participated in at least one clinic during their time at law school. As far as what we do, the Federal Tax Clinic represents low-income clients in cases of tax controversy between the client and IRS or Massachusetts Department of Revenue. That's the Massachusetts state equivalent of IRS. So here's a fact pattern for most of our clients. Generally, IRS or MADOR has sent them a letter saying that they owe some tax liability. The client's position is that they don't owe that liability or cannot pay that liability or don't really know what the letter is and want help. We have several mechanisms to shift or reduce a tax liability. We can ask IRS to look at the return again through a process called audit reconsideration. We can submit evidence like an amended return or an affidavit that supports the client's position and thereby entitles them to a lower liability or refund if the client's balance of income, expenses, assets, liabilities make it impossible for the client to pay their liability. We can try to settle with IRS through what's called an offer in compromise. A successful OIC can reduce that client's liability. If the client was married and their spouse submitted tax returns on their behalf without their knowledge or under duress, and they owe a large tax liability, we can apply for innocent spouse relief so that the tax liability is shifted entirely to the party at fault. To prevent IRS from engaging in enforcement actions against our clients, we can place them on currently not collectible status. IRS will then not garnish their wages, right, or levy or lien on them, and the interest and penalties on the associated tax liabilities will continue to run. We also help clients secure money that they might have missed out on in the past. So on the federal and Massachusetts state level, the statute of limitations for claiming a refund is 3 years past the filing deadline. I say usually because we're in the twilight zone. Right? It's like whenever you had a tax season that ended on July 15th or a tax season that ended on May 17th. So 3 years past the due date for 2017, which was due in 2018, would have been earlier this month. But because the deadline's been pushed, they also pushed the statute of limitations for claiming that refund. We also collaborate with other clinics to generate better outcomes for their clients. This semester, I've worked on immigration cases, housing cases, family law cases, exoneree cases, and referrals from the Veterans Clinic. We also provide tax guidance to organizations with local and national reach. Last Wednesday, my boss and I gave a presentation to 40 family law attorneys in Massachusetts who represent domestic abuse victims. our presentation was on tax issues that often impact their client base. That's particularly important now because of the way stimulus money is being dispersed. So it's through IRS, you get it for yourself, your dependents, and with more additional payments coming up later this summer, for a lot of these victims of domestic abuse, there can be thousands or even over $10,000 dollars at stake, depending on how the fact pattern works out. We also submit, sorry, do you have a question?
Well, I'm just thinking about all this. I'm the question that's on my mind. And I'm sorry if you already said this at the beginning, but how did you get this job? I'm sure some people would love to have a job like this.
So I got very lucky. I'll be totally honest. Beth Lyon, who was one of those two professors I met at Cornell, who worked founder of the Farm Workers Legal Assistance Clinic. She was at Villanova Law before Cornell, and she shared a wall with my current boss, Keith Fogg. So they were friends. They've known each other for years. Before I joined the Federal Tax Clinic, I'd done a lot of work, obviously, for Cornell. I'd also done a lot of
you had done work for Cornell?
Cornell.
Yeah. Can you what do you mean you did work for them?
So I created the service trips for them. So that was as a paid research assistant clinic. I was the student director of Cornell's low-income taxpayer practicum as a master's student while at Cornell. And in addition to that, I also, while I was working at Ernst & Young, still kept up with the program. So I was working in New York for Ernst & Young. I think we had at one point a conference, an event, low-income tax event. And I would MC that event for Cornell. I provide guidance on the trips I'd started at Cornell. So the Alaska trip, which I do have to give credit to my tax professor, John McKinley. He told me to reach out to the organization in Alaska because he'd seen that trip done over at Ithaca College, which is Cornell's in Ithaca. And so I'd done those trips. By the time I joined the Federal Tax Clinic, I had done 3 seasons of volunteer income tax assistance work, basically preparing tax returns for low-income people at a relatively high level. So out of the past 5 seasons, including this one, and 4 of them, I've held the advanced volunteer income tax assistance certification, which is basically a free certification you can get through Lincoln Learn, which is like IRS, basically tax teaching program. So you can learn all this stuff yourself, but I had a lot of background before joining HLS. And I should also say my current job is a creation of additional COVID funding. So when I left Ernst & Young, I flew to Denver next week, helped out Cornell, was working for Cornell part-time. I then joined a nonprofit that I was working with full-time in New York City, Urban Upbound. They're also great people. Was going to spend time with them throughout the entire tax season, and then interned for Harvard over the summer in the tax clinic. But then pandemic happened, right? And no one knew what was happening. There was a point in March, I'll be honest with you guys, where it's like Cornell gig, I was their engagement advisor, so helping out on service trips. No one's going on service trips during the pandemic. Nope. Low income tax site, my nonprofit closed in New York City. So it's like I'm jobless. And then Harvard says, oh, we don't even know if we're going to have a summer program. So it's like, oh man, I left EY, my comfy job, making my decent salary. And it's like, oh, I'm like unemployed. I have no future. But then turned out HLS decided to go remote over the summer and they need help with pandemic stuff because stimulus payments go through IRS. My skill set suddenly became much more valuable. So that's how I joined HLS, and I basically ran their, helped set up and administer their virtual tax preparation program. So during the pandemic, there are 3 sites or 3 programs where low-income people can get tax done for free in the US. It's volunteer income tax assistance, tax counseling for the elderly, and AARP. All of these programs either partially or entirely closed in the middle of the tax season last year, where thousands of dollars were at stake because of stimulus payments. So people who wouldn't be eligible for thousands are suddenly eligible for thousands, and they have no free tax prep options. So Harvard steps in. I help them build out, again, going to be honest, small scale, but to the clients that we helped, big help, virtual tax prep program. And my boss liked my work enough to work me into the grant for the next year. So that's how I got this job in this position.
I have a million questions and comments. Just let me do like a radio reset here. We are with Jon-Yin Chong, who is a student of LSAT DMin and future law school applicant and current paralegal at Harvard Law School, working on low-income tax. Jon-Yin, what was it like transitioning? You know, you started by talking about going to Alaska and going to Bakersfield and going to Denver and working with everybody face to face. Then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. How did it change your practice working with clients virtually?
Oh my gosh. Oh, it was so many problems with virtual tax prep. So we created this virtual program to help those left out in the cold, basically, without any free tax prep options. And that's like, sounds like a great idea, right? But then you come to some quick realities. You realize that a lot of the clients can't send you documents virtually. Many lack technology. Some, as I mentioned before, don't speak English. Others are disabled. They might be blind or physically disabled. So I came up with a solution to sort of help those clients. I put a printer in my trunk, a laptop in my back seat, and using my phone as a wireless hotspot, I sort of took remote tax prep on the road. So I moved up to Boston so I could get documents from clients in person and prepare tax returns pizza delivery style.
Wow.
So I put myself in PPE. I met clients for documents outside of personal residences and in parking lots.
Wow.
They would slip documents in my rear passenger side window and place them in my trunk or place them in my trunk. Then I would prepare their tax returns in my back seat.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is an amazing new personal statement if you decide to go that route. I mean, that's just such a, you're solving a problem in your field, right? Your resume clearly demonstrates this like progression toward becoming this baller tax attorney. And that story along the way, you know, like most, I think COVID stories are pretty lame, but not that one, because that one is like, holy shit, I'm solving this giant problem and just getting right to work. I don't know. What do you, Ben, do you agree with that or?
Oh, I agree with that for sure. And I almost, you mentioned earlier, and I don't know what the numbers are, but you said that, I'll be honest with you, that the scope wasn't, large or something like that. I can't remember exactly what you said. And
yeah,
I can see how that would be necessarily inhibited by the way in which you were solving the problem. And I could see some people almost giving up because of that inability to reach more people. But the reality is you can only solve as many problems as you can solve in the situation that you're in. And the fact that you're out there solving that problem is 100 times better than someone saying, well, we can't reach enough people, so I'm not going to reach anybody. Right. So that alone to me is impressive that you press forward and it's making me think of that Matthew McConaughey movie where he's like driving around in that car and he's like a lawyer. I don't know why, but you're driving around in the car.
Yeah. It's
providing services.
It's small in the grand scope of 8 billion people on the planet, but it's that client's entire life. I mean, we're talking about somebody who maybe gets deported if Jon-Yin doesn't drive over there and let them put the documents through the window. I mean, I just love, boy, those details of the documents going through the window and you're all suited up in your PPE and the pizza delivery style. I mean, God, you've got so much to work with there for a personal statement.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go that way, I'm sure you could go 1,000 other ways, but that seems like a fruitful avenue to explore.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the rewrite. And I should also say this was something we did last year because all the free tax sites were closed. My boss would be very mad if I didn't say this. Harvard Law School currently the federal tax clinic does not process current year returns. So if you need help with current year returns, we can help you because a lot of those free tax sites are now operating virtually or in person partially.
Yeah, if there's not a need, right?
Yeah.
You should spend your resources where there is a need. I would say that Jon-Yin, you're 30, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I feel like there's so much in your background and there's so much to write about, in part because you've been, no, not in part, almost entirely because you've been working since you got out of school and so forth. And we have so many people who write into the show and say, well, I'm 28, I'm too old, or it's getting
God.
late, I got to apply now, and I'm thinking, well, look, here, you're 30 and you have so much to talk about. You're so much more ready for law school in some ways than so many other folks who are 26. And I just, yeah, just a shout out for people to consider your age and how that's a benefit in this case, right?
Well, I consider the different
Absolutely.
experience that Jon-Yin has added to his resume in the ages 28, 29, 30.
Yeah.
I mean, he's looking like a total, not just because of his LSAT score, but he's looking like a totally different applicant, even because of these anecdotes that have come up in the last couple of years that he wouldn't have had when he was 28.
Sure.
Absolutely. And I just want to say to the people who are hesitant to withdraw their apps and reapply, it's like, granted, I hit the jackpot as far as mentors and opportunities, right? But you don't know what could happen. Like the opportunities that
But
you
Jon-Yin, I
may
want to jump in here
encounter.
for one second. You hit the jackpot because you worked hard too, right? I mean, every
Yeah.
time you talk about this, you're like, oh, I want to be completely honest. I knew this person, but you knew that, yeah, you can know people, but if you don't work your ass off, they're not gonna go to bat for you. So, I mean, I'm not trying to like, inflate your ego here. I'm just saying, like, factually speaking, you are successful in a large part because of how you interacted with people all along the way, right? So it's both. You're benefiting from these connections, but those connections are benefiting you because of what you've done. I mean, it's impressive. So
Thank you.
anyway, sorry,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
No. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But yeah, it's just, you never know what could happen to you. I would have never thought in my tiny New York studio, jobless and worrying about what I'm going to do in the next year, that a year later, I would have had this incredible experience. So it's we focus, and I think it's good that we do this. A lot of people focus on the downside risk, but we fail to invest enough time in exploring the upside and the opportunities of taking a little more time off, in addition to getting the benefits of applying early next year, or maybe having a higher LSAT score next year. You get a whole nother year to learn more about the world. The older I get, it's like, and this is used so often, but it's so true, the more I learn that I don't know, and I find new things that I want to learn, right? So that's the benefit of time. And I think patience also. Patience looks professional. Patience is a virtue. So,
oh yeah, totally.
yeah.
What's something new you've learned as an employee of the Federal Tax Clinic?
Oh, so I'll tell a story for this one that I think will resonate. Hopefully, will resonate with people. At the start of each semester, Keith Fogg, my boss, the founder and director of the tax clinic, tells new students a past case that illustrates the importance of client agency to protect the identities of the client. I'll be anonymizing the information in this story. So let's just say at some point in time, there was a person, and that person won the lottery. That individual was excited about their win, but they wanted to avoid taxes on their winnings. So they hatched a plan. They realized that their mother, who was living in a different state, lived in a state that didn't tax any lottery winnings. So they had their mother claim the prize and then give them the money. Now, it's true that the mother's state doesn't tax winnings on gambling income, but you know who does? The federal government. The mother didn't report the lottery winnings on her tax return, but a 1099-G form, informational form, was issued to the IRS. They sent her a letter telling her that she'd understated her income and that they'd recalculated her return. She now owed a substantial tax liability. She reached out to my boss for help.
Yeah.
After examining her financial status, Keith determined that she was ineligible for an IRS settlement. She was by no means rich, but had enough assets to pay the liability according to IRS's offer and compromise eligibility status. However, Keith did find a way or did see a way that we could substantially reduce the tax liability, we could tell IRS the truth and shift the liability over to her kid, the one who actually won the lottery. But by this point, the kid had blown through the winnings. They had little to no assets, and therefore actually had a good shot at an IRS settlement and a sizable tax liability reduction, facing down, let's say, a high 4-figure to a low 6-figure tax liability, again, anonymizing the data. The mother decided that she would rather pay the liability than trouble her child with paperwork and a few meetings. Keith offered her a path that could save her thousands of dollars, and she chose instead to eat the cost out of love for her child. It's a frustrating, tragically beautiful, I think, story, and a reminder for someone in a profession that's often laser focused on the bottom line, that there are more important things in life than money.
I have mixed feelings about that story, John.
I know, I do. Yeah.
I'm like, who is this dirtbag kid? And I really want that kid to get stuck with the taxes, not his mom. Damn it.
Yeah.
Well, it's a tough situation too, because I mean, as a parent, you know, there are things that I want to do for my kids, but there are also things I know that I probably shouldn't do for them, because by doing it for them, not letting them interact with the world or encounter it in a way that would teach them a valuable lesson. So I'm not jumping up and down saying, yes, I'm glad she paid for that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about the situation, but it's
neither am I. It's
situation.
Just, but it's definitely something to always be aware of, right? It's like, ultimately I can, and I think because some people get very, very invested in their clients, right? Yeah. The people who pursue this type of work, they do it out of passion. They get livable wage salary, especially compared to a lot of the people we're working with, but you're not exactly making bank. You do this out of passion. So that passion always has to be tempered with respect for the client's agency and their unique circumstances.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sure. Thank you for sharing. Other questions, Nathan?
Well, I saw a headline this morning that I think we should probably talk about. I had a really good experience with, the only good experience that I had in law school was with my tax professor, Heather Field at UC Hastings. She was the best teacher and also the most interested in like actually teaching and connecting to students and stuff. But tax also seems to be an extremely promising field for young lawyers to get into. When people say they want to get into, I don't know, entertainment law or something, I tend to be a little like, hey, do you know what that means and how to get there? And do you have any clue what you're talking about? But when people say tax law, my ears perk up. I'm always like, oh yeah, there's going to be lots of jobs there forever. And it's real big business and real, even at, obviously there's opportunities to work in tax for low income people, as well as extremely high income people, which means that you can get paid as a tax lawyer. But did you guys see this headline in the Times today? Biden seeks $80 billion to beef up IRS audits of high earners. Subhead, the president's American Families Plan, which he will detail this week, will be offset in part by a tax enforcement effort that administration officials believe will raise $700 billion over a decade. So this is, a reversal of the Trump administration's, like, let's just let everybody cheat on taxes as much as we possibly can, to a new, one way that we could get money for the federal government is to not let all of these high earners get away with avoiding so many taxes. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Jon-Yin, you have any thoughts about that?
I think it's a good thing. And here's the reason why. In the last few years, I'd say last 5, 6, 7 years ish, there's been a push at the IRS towards automation. But what automation does is it takes a person out of the chain and unfortunately allows for easy pickings for a lot of low-income clients, right? So low-income client makes easy, simple, innocent mistake on their return. It's easier for them to get caught up in the IRS's enforcement system because there's less discretion. So instead of receiving letters and being able to talk to people, I shouldn't say, if you receive an IRS letter, this is very important. If you receive an IRS letter, please reach out to, especially if you're low income, to an LITC or some sort of professional and respond. Don't keep your head in the sand. That's where a lot of people can run into trouble. And because there's less discretion in the system, because of automation, I feel like low-income people have been impacted in greater numbers than they used to be. So this is good, I think.
I was wondering why the IRS was going after low-income individuals, because I couldn't imagine there being that much money for them to make through an audit. But your explanation of the automation makes total sense. It's 29
Yeah, when
cents,
people
right?
get a W-2 or a 1099, but then they don't file their taxes, it's real easy for an IRS computer to spit out that, like, hey, what's up? You owe us money and you didn't do anything. But it's much harder. I mean, I would imagine it takes actual humans to comb through 5 different layers of corporations that own different, like it's hard. I think, I would imagine, programmatically it would be hard to write a software program that's going to really dig into somebody who has hundreds of millions of dollars and is hiding hundreds of millions of dollars in these complicated ways. It's just not a no-brainer. So I think actual wage earners it's ironic, right? But I had read that before, that actual wage earners tend to get audited more than people with hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, there's certain things that are very, very easy for IRS to pick up on. One of the big ones that a lot of people don't realize is if you get credit card debt forgiven, that's taxable. So that gets included in taxable income. So that can trip up a lot of people.
When do people get credit card debt forgiven? From like a bankruptcy or something?
So basically, if you don't pay your bills and the credit card company then sells the debt to a debt collector, right? So
I see. So you pay it off at a quarter on the dollar, but then the IRS is going to attribute 75 cents of income to you. Got it.
Exactly that.
And that's real easy for them to like catch in mass, right? They can just, like a whale, come through and get 1 million krill like that. And even those people probably can't pay, or they don't pay that much, but it is a profitable endeavor still for the IRS to, like, they can, because that's what they're really looking for, right? Is that they have to make more money back than their budget, essentially, or at least that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And so people will get letters because of that, but there are ways that your tax liability with IRS can be reduced. So as I mentioned before, reach out to an LITC if you're in this situation, if you're within the income guidelines. If you're not within the income guidelines, it may just be easier to pay. So depending on the case.
You've said LITC a couple of times. You're talking about a low income tax clinic, right? And people can
that's correct.
Search for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have and I see here you have some websites and social media stuff. Do you want to tell anybody about any of these things?
We'll post links to all of these. Legal Services Center of Harvard Law School is legalservicescenter.org. We'll post a link to Jon-Yin's LinkedIn page if you want to connect. We've got an email at Harvard for Jon-Yin. And yeah, that is excellent. Hey, Jon-Yin, have you connected to Nikki Black?
No, I have not, but I enjoyed the interview.
You should touch base with her. She's one of my best friends. I hang out with her all the time virtually, because she's in LA and I'm in Tahoe. But you should see if you could connect with her, because she does a lot of immigration law, and it's something that we're going to talk about later on the show. But she does end up doing tax stuff for her immigration clients, and I think our LSAT students, so many of them that want to work in immigration would be like, oh, tax? No, I'll never do that. And that's like, okay, well, then you're going to be a shitty immigration attorney because you have these avenues that you could explore for your clients and you're not going to because you're worried about tax. Anyway, it's Nikki's birthday today. You should send her an email or connect to her on LinkedIn. She really likes hearing from podcast folks, which you are.
Definitely will immediately after this.
Cool.
Oh,
anything else?
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that in another multiverse, there's definitely a version of me who never found the Thinking LSAT podcast. And my life is so much richer than his. Nathan, if you hadn't discouraged me from applying to law school in 2020, I'd probably be a 1L. Paying full tuition for the Zoom school experience. I wouldn't have interned at HLS. Right now, I'm doing 34 returns a week for rural Alaskans, predominantly Native American rural Alaskans. I love that work too. The work I've done this past year is bigger than law school. It's probably one of the best things I'll ever do in my life. So when I'm old and wrinkled, right, and sipping iced tea on my porch, it's something I'll be able to look back at with pride. I wouldn't trade this last year for a full coupon code stipend and acceptance at any law school in the world. So just thank you both so much for everything that you've done for me and everything you continue to do for aspiring lawyers around the world.
Wow. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, good things come to those who wait. And Ben and I are really fortunate to be able to just hopefully open people's eyes to, you don't need to rush into any of this stuff. If you hang out and keep working on your career and keep working on your LSAT score, then like, I don't know. Ben, have you ever seen any bad things happen as a result of people waiting another year?
No, because the only bad thing that's happening in my mind, and this is all I'm looking out, maybe I'm missing something here, but they're starting their 40-year career 1 year later, right? But so many good things can happen. Just like what you talked about, opportunities that you didn't know existed because they weren't in your field of vision. Maybe they didn't exist. LSAT score, that's just like impossible to argue with.
It's like worst case, Jon-Yin gets to that porch 1 year later. But probably he's not going to get to that porch any later. He's probably going to have a much nicer porch, actually.
He's probably going to get there sooner. Yeah.
He's probably going to get there sooner and in a nicer place, having done more with his career, because he ended up getting his legal career off. It was already on a good trajectory, but now he's going to be on a much better trajectory with no debt instead of this lifetime of debt. So anyway,
and just knowing where you want to go more, right, with your legal career as you go into it, it's going to be so much more informed as you attend class and so forth.
Oh yeah, that's amazing for sure.
Yeah, we should be thanking you, Jon-Yin. I mean, it is the most gratifying thing that happens to us is when people, when they end up following some solid advice and having good things happen to them. That's why we get up in the morning. So thanks.
You're very
I get
welcome.
up because my kids wake me up, but yeah, other than that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's wrap it up there. Jon-Yin Chong is a paralegal at Harvard Law School and has a whole raft of low-income tax experience at a variety of different places. And you can find ways to connect to him at thinkinglsat.com. Cool. All right. Thanks, Jon-Yin.
Have a good show.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.